My name is Lily, and I'm 35 years old. Independence has always been the foundation of my life. For years, I dedicated myself to building a successful career as a financial advisor in a bustling suburb of Chicago. I saved diligently, sacrificing to purchase my own home, a $5 million property that symbolized my hard work, independence, and the future I had envisioned. This wasn't just a house, it was my safe space, a symbol of everything I had achieved. Then I met Mark, a 38-year-old consultant in the tech industry. He seemed perfect, kind, intelligent, and appreciative of my ambition. Our wedding day felt like the beginning of a wonderful chapter, but I had no idea that what I thought was love would soon turn into my biggest nightmare. Soon after we were married, Mark and I settled into my home, where I thought we'd start our lives together. But a few weeks later, his mother, Lorraine, started coming over unannounced. Lorraine was a 65-year-old retired school principal who was as controlling as she was opinionated. At first, her remarks about my home decor and cooking felt like harmless comments, but they soon turned into harsh critiques. "Lily, don't you think this furniture is a bit much for someone about to start a family?" she would say, her voice dripping with condescension. Her visits became frequent and overbearing, and I started feeling like an outsider in my own home. The one person I thought would stand by me, Mark, merely brushed off her interference, saying, "She's just trying to help Lily. Mothers worry about everything." Disappointed but hopeful, I told myself things would improve. I discovered I was pregnant shortly after, hoping the news would bring us closer. But instead of joy, Lorraine greeted the news with an unfeeling remark. "Well, you'll need to tighten up on your spending. We don't want unnecessary health issues." I had been longing for support, but the dismissive response left me feeling colder than ever. Then, one evening, everything changed. I arrived home after a long day, looking forward to the peace of my sanctuary, only to find the front door locked. Confused, I knocked, assuming Mark would answer. Instead, Lorraine's voice came from behind the door. "You can come in, Lily, but only if you're ready to contribute that $20,000 you saved for the baby. It's time for you to start covering family expenses." My heart dropped. That money was meant for my child's future, college savings, a secure foundation. I replied firmly, "Lorraine, that fund is for the baby. It's not meant for family expenses." Her tone turned sharp. "Well, if you're not willing to prioritize family, then you have no place here. This is my son's house too, and you can't act selfishly in a family home." When I refused again, Lorraine's anger erupted. She opened the door only to grab my arm, tearing at my clothes in a fit of rage, and threw me out of my own home, slamming the door behind me. I was left standing on the porch, humiliated and shaken, with nowhere to go. As I walked away that night, I felt a fierce determination rising within me. I would not let them take what I had worked so hard to build. I decided to stay with my parents temporarily, clear my mind, and strategize my next steps. That night at my parents' home, I explained everything to them. My father, a retired attorney, and my mother, a kind and supportive homemaker, listened with a mix of shock and anger. I could see the pain in their eyes, but they remained calm, reassuring me. "You've come this far, Lily," my dad said, his voice steady. "We'll help you through this, but you need to take control. You've worked too hard to let them take this away from you." Their support rekindled a fire within me. Determined not to remain a victim, I reached out to my college friend Emma, now a highly respected lawyer. Emma had always been there for me, but now I needed her professional expertise more than ever. As I sat in her office, pouring out everything that had happened, Emma's expression grew intense. "Lily, what they've done is not only wrong, but likely illegal. That money was yours, saved for your child's future. We can build a case around this, but it's going to require courage on your part." Her words felt like a rallying call. Though the thought of going to court was intimidating, the idea of letting Lorraine and Mark win was far worse. Together, we began strategizing. Emma helped me document every incident of mistreatment and coercion, from Lorraine's demeaning comments to the night I was forcibly locked out of my home. We gathered text messages, emails, and any voicemails I had as evidence of the emotional abuse I had endured. In the evenings, I'd sit alone, reflecting on all the small moments that had chipped away at my sense of self. I remembered how Lorraine had dismissed my excitement over the baby fund I'd set up, treating it as a selfish act rather than something beneficial for her grandchild. Each memory filled me with a stronger resolve to reclaim my life. Then, one night over dinner with my parents, I shared my plan to take the case to court. "I can't allow them to take everything from me," I said with firm conviction. "This is about more than the house. It's about my child's future and my independence." My mother wrapped her arm around my shoulders, a gentle smile on her face. "We'll be here for you, Lily, every step of the way. You deserve a life of peace, and no one has the right to take that from you." The following morning, I signed the necessary paperwork in Emma's office. With each document, my resolve grew stronger. This was my first official step in reclaiming my life. In the weeks leading up to the court date, Emma and I worked tirelessly. We combed through every detail, preparing for the arguments Lorraine and Mark's attorney might use against me. I felt like a warrior preparing for battle, no longer the timid woman Lorraine and Mark could intimidate. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. My heart pounded as I walked into the courthouse, surrounded by other people facing their own battles. Emma was by my side, calm and confident. Her steady presence grounded me. "Lily, you're ready for this," she whispered as we waited. "Remember, you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for your child's future." As the judge called my case, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, bracing myself to face Lorraine and Mark one last time. As I walked into the courtroom, my nerves steadied, though the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel Lorraine's gaze on me, her eyes cold and calculating, while Mark sat next to her with a rigid expression. The judge, a composed woman with a strong presence, took her seat, and the room fell silent. Emma began by presenting our case with precision and clarity. She described the events leading up to my decision to file for divorce, highlighting the baby fund conspiracy and the coercive tactics Lorraine and Mark used to try to claim the money I had saved for my child's future. The judge listened intently as Emma detailed how Lorraine had demanded the $20,000 and ultimately forced me out of my own home. "Your Honor," Emma said, her voice steady and commanding, "my client, Lily, set aside these funds solely for her unborn child. This was a personal savings decision made in the best interest of her family. Forcing her to choose between her child's future and her place in her home constitutes severe emotional abuse." I glanced at Lorraine and Mark. Lorraine's expression remained unreadable, though her mouth was set in a tight line. Mark, on the other hand, looked visibly uncomfortable. When it was my turn to testify, I stood up, took a deep breath, and faced the judge directly. "Your Honor," I began, my voice strong yet laced with emotion. "This money was meant to ensure that my child has a secure future, something I worked hard to build. I was willing to support my family in many ways, but I couldn't let go of something so important to me and my child." I recounted the night Lorraine locked me out and demanded I hand over the money, describing the feeling of betrayal and helplessness as I was forced out of my own home. I explained how Mark had stood by silently, choosing to support his mother instead of standing with me. Every word I spoke felt like a release, as if I were shedding the weight of every moment of abuse I had endured. As I finished, there was a pause. The judge seemed deep in thought, her gaze focused and serious. Then it was Mark's attorney's turn to speak. He tried to paint me as overly protective of my finances, implying that I had been resistant to sharing my resources with the family. But I was ready for this. When Emma cross-examined, she countered every argument, pointing out that my intention was to provide for my child's future, not to withhold resources from the family. She cited the messages and emails we had collected as proof of Lorraine's manipulation. The hearing continued for what felt like hours, with both sides presenting their cases. Finally, the judge called for a recess, giving us a brief moment to gather ourselves. Emma turned to me, her expression filled with quiet confidence. "You did incredibly well, Lily," she said. "I think we've built a strong case. Stay focused. Whatever they try next, we'll be ready." After a short break, we returned to the courtroom. The judge took her seat once again and addressed us directly. "Based on the evidence presented, including testimony and documented instances of coercion and emotional abuse, I find that the actions taken by Lorraine and Mark were not only manipulative but damaging to Lily's well-being and her right to provide for her child." She paused, glancing at Lorraine and Mark before continuing. "Therefore, I am granting Lily sole custody of her child, full ownership of her property, and control over her financial assets, including the $20,000 fund." She looked directly at them as she added, "Further penalties will be assessed for the abusive tactics used against her." A wave of relief flooded through me. I had won. As I exited the courtroom with Emma by my side, I felt a surge of empowerment and peace. The struggle had been exhausting, but I had finally reclaimed my life and my future. In the days following the court ruling, I moved back into my home, feeling an overwhelming sense of freedom. I walked through each room, reconnecting with the space that had once felt like a battleground. Now, it was mine again, a sanctuary for me and my child. I painted the walls, redecorated, and filled the house with items that brought me joy, making it truly feel like home. Embracing single motherhood wasn't without its challenges, but I was finally at peace. I had secured the baby fund, ensuring that my child would have the foundation I dreamed of, and I could now focus on creating a future filled with love, respect, and security. I set up a small nursery, carefully choosing every detail, from the colors on the walls to the books and toys that would one day fill the shelves. One quiet evening, I sat alone in the nursery, gently rocking in a chair I'd bought just for those late-night moments with my baby. Placing a hand on my growing belly, I whispered a promise. "I'll make sure you always feel safe and loved, and that you'll grow up knowing you can stand up for yourself." In that moment, I realized that this was more than a fresh start for me. It was the beginning of a new legacy for my child, one built on resilience, courage, and the unwavering strength to overcome adversity. Looking back on everything, I felt grateful for the journey, even with all the hardships. The betrayal and hurt hadn't broken me, they had made me stronger. I'd learned the importance of self-respect and the power of standing up for what I believed in. I was no longer the woman who had allowed others to dictate her life. Now I was the mother who would teach her child to build a life filled with dignity and pride. As I closed my eyes that night, feeling the gentle stirrings of my baby within me, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready. I had reclaimed my life, my home, and my future, and nothing would take that away from me again. This was my story of resilience and survival, and I was prepared to embrace whatever came next with open arms.